Hi everyone. I'm Emma from Lover's Way. I'm part of the social media champions group. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Brad Christmas, who is the author of this beautiful book, Saltwater Boy. It's a brilliant new Lover's Way novel out from Walker Books. So thanks for joining us today, Brad.
My pleasure. Thanks for your interest in the book.
That's okay. I absolutely loved it. It was such a rich book about a beautiful part of the world as well. As this book's just come out, is there a bit of a synopsis you can give us so that people who haven't read it can get a bit of an idea of what the book's about?
Yeah, sure. It's a sort of coming of age story, as you said, set on the south coast of New South Wales, um, and the main character, a boy called Matthews, I guess had a pretty troubled start to life, but it's all about his quest, I guess, to create a new identity for himself, create a new definition of family and a new definition of home in a beautiful new environment.
Yeah, great. And it does have such a brilliant sense of place. And I know that you sort of are half on the south coast. So did you set it in on anywhere in particular? Is Crawley Point a real place? And how did you sort of go about bringing that sense of the beautiful south coast of New South Wales into the book?
Yeah, it's sort of Cruel Point was a fictional place. I considered setting it somewhere real, but I kind of liked the freedom to sort of manipulate certain things
Yeah.
a little bit. I guess the story was inspired by childhood experiences. I grew up having holidays around Jervis
Hmm.
Bay. There's a debate amongst those people about what's the correct
Yes, I never
pronunciation.
know which is correct.
So yeah, I guess a lot of the characters were drawn from people I met around that area and my childhood experiences there. But a lot of the writing I did, I've got a place, a little shack on the coast, a little bit further than that,
Hmm.
a place called Manyard near Bendalong. So yeah, I guess while I was writing, a lot of the writing happened during the COVID lockdown, and I was
Yeah.
living down there and walking the bush every day, swimming in the ocean. So I think a lot of the details of that part of the coast also sort of found their way into the book.
Amazing. I did start Googling whether Crawley Point was a real place, so I'm sad to hear it's not, but it's very like a lot of places down there.
Yeah, I think yeah, I kind of like the idea of. I mean, I guess like a character. I guess the environment's like a character, and liked being all elements of the different places that I'm kind of familiar with in that part of the
Yeah.
world.
And I know that you engaged UN elders in the writing process. How did they sort of inform what you were writing about?
Guess I mean the character of Bill is an old Indigenous fisherman in the book, and he's based on two or three guys I really got to know well. A kid growing up,
Hmm.
so I guess my experiences with them sort of informed the development of that character. And in recent years, I've been pretty involved in some sort of activism around
Hmm.
community down coast, and through that we've pretty close ties with the Jerrinja Ewan community down there. So I yeah just enlisted the help of someone to make sure I kind of got some of the details right, and that it was kind of respectful. I wasn't doing
Mm.
anything inappropriate. So
And that
yeah,
definitely comes through in the character of Old Bill, who's, as you said, sort of a wonderful fatherly figure.
yes, yeah, definitely.
And a big part of the themes of the novel is sort of Matthew, the main character, he's got a lot to deal with. He's growing up very quickly with sort of his father having to go to jail, money issues, moving house, all of those sort of coming of age issues, but made a lot more intense. So, how did you sort of find Matthew's voice in the novel when they're such a young person dealing with those big things?
Yeah, it was sort of tricky. It's funny actually. I was talking to someone about this the other day, but having read the book, all these people assumed must have had a terrible childhood and a terrible father. Have to make it clear I've got a wonderful father, and I had a very um, so I mean. some of it's drawn. I mean, certainly my interaction with the Indigenous fishermen's kind of drawn from my own experience. But that sort of background, I guess, I've done a lot of youth work over the years with kids
Yeah,
who've come from fairly troubled backgrounds, broken homes. So I think a lot of that experience really informs, that I guess the shape of what happened to Matthew and all, but also he responded to it.
yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah. He's sort of dealing with all the usual things you'd think children have to go through in childhood, and then all these other really grown-up things in the book, which I found really moving at points.
yeah, and that's it's all sort of stuff that I've seen young people about his age have to deal with, and yeah, it's really I've always been fascinated by the way kids and young people are able to, transcend really difficult childhoods
Mm,
and, create a new identity for them.
turn it around.
Mm.
And I know that you, in your professional life, are a full-time writer, but this is your debut YA novel. So, how did you sort of find the process of writing this versus your everyday writing?
Much more pleasurable. It's nice when you don't have a set word count or a deadline or a brief to
Yeah.
hanging over your head. Yeah, it was sort of a long process, I guess. This one, it started out as a short story quite a few
Oh,
years
wow.
ago. The Big Issue magazine, a lot of people probably know,
Yeah.
have a fiction edition each year. I had the story, kind of a short story, was published in there. But the characters just kind of stayed with me. I just sort of had this nagging feeling that I wasn't finished with them, and
Hmm.
they had more to tell, more of their story that they wanted to tell. So, but it was a really pleasurable experience. It's just it's scary, I think, turning something that's a couple of thousand words into 120,000 words is
Yeah, wow.
daunting at first. But yeah, I just really love the process and love the freedom to go where my creative instincts were taking
Mm,
me.
yes. And did you find the editorial process hard because you're dealing with so many extra words?
It wasn't too actually. It was the pub compared to commercial writing, publishers are much gentler. I found
Oh,
um,
really?
you get used to fairly how do I put it, frank and forthright feedback
I can
in professional
imagine.
writing. I was really that was a really kind of pleasing part of the process. Just that publishers were people like with Walker Books were really um, everyone's on the same page. Everyone's wants to see the story shine, and
Mm,
I really enjoyed the process. So really, I'm lucky that I had an editor that I really have a good relationship with and
they
trust
understood the
implicitly.
character.
Absolutely, yeah. So I felt like I was in sort of really good, capable hands there, and
Oh,
I
that's
really
so great.
appreciate that support.
And is there, there's a lot of themes in this book, but if you could sort of draw out some major messages that you want young people or older people who enjoy reading YA to take away from this book, what do you think those would be?
I think the biggest thing for me is I hope that readers get a sense of what I experienced as a kid. In those Indigenous fishermen. I grew up in a time when history was all Captain Cook and Joseph Banks and Francis Greenway, and
Mm,
Indigenous people were hardly even mentioned, in school, and I didn't have any interaction in my normal life with Indigenous people, but meeting those guys just kind of really opened a window for me into another world, and in me, it's really kind of sparked curiosity, and I quickly got a sense of the kind of generosity of spirit that
mm,
were showing, sharing culture, sharing wisdom. So I think that's the thing I'd really like people to take away. I don't think there's in Australia there's enough curiosity about we've got this incredible culture that stretches back longer than any culture on earth. They're surprisingly uncurious about that culture. So yeah, that's the thing I really hope people take away.
Mm. And Matthew's so curious in the novel about it and really takes everything old Bill says and is curious about it the whole way through.
Mm. Yeah, and that's certainly how I felt, being in Matthew's shoes as a kid.
Oh, amazing. Well, there is so much more that we could talk about with this book because it is so rich and it has so many wonderful themes in it. But we're going to let everyone from the Love Love's Way community read it for themselves. So just to remind everyone, that is Saltwater Boy by Bradley Christmas, and it is out now from Walker Books. So thank you very much for talking to us today, Bradley.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.